Not on My Watch, episode 20, take 3. Good afternoon. My name is James K. Holder II. Some of you may know me as Sir James II, and I'd like to welcome you back to Not on My Watch. As always, I'd like to ask you to subscribe, like, comment, and share. I want you to retweet this and repeat this. If you are watching today, it is Wednesday, June 21st, 2017, and after a rainy night in Georgia, Jon Ossoff, the Democratic contender for a long-standing GOP seat in the 6th Congressional District of Georgia, was unsuccessful in defeating Karen Handel, despite the fact that it was the most expensive race in history. So, I know everyone on the planet has an opinion about this race and what Jon Ossoff could have done better and what he should do differently and what the Democrats could have done differently. I'm not going to blame Jon Ossoff. I'm not going to blame the rain. I'm not going to blame GOP voter suppression. What we are dealing with is a party that don't know how to throw a damn party. There are so many similarities between, there's a reason why the Democratic Party or the Grand Old Party use the term party, because there's a lot of similarities. In this episode, I wanted to devote to going over party planning basics and relate them back to where we find ourselves in the resistance and how we can learn from these mistakes. There are two things I want to, I'll get into in the episode. Again, we're tuning out all the white noise, but, and of course, hindsight is 20/20. But this episode is entitled, this is episode 20 of Not on My Watch. It's been a long road. We're still going. And this episode is entitled Late to the Party. So let's just get into it. So, one, how do you throw a party? I learned how to throw a party by being the president of the African American Student Union at Georgia Tech. This was something that I did in 2006 and 2007, so about 10 years ago. But the basics, the mechanics are still the same. There's certain things that you go over, basically a checklist, a running checklist to determine all the aspects of your party, and I form them in a series of questions. And they're basically the 5 W's and 1 H. So it's what, where, when, why, who, and how. And so I'm going to go through these one by one so we can discuss the pitfalls of this. Forgive me. I am testing out a new format. One thing I really want to do is get these episodes up faster. And so one way to do that is to actually do less editing, do less titles. And so some of what I want to do is just testing out a different set every now and then, testing out different file formats, seeing what uploads faster. I think before it was all about quality, quality, quality. Then I realized when you go to export this and edit it in Adobe Premiere, it does take a few hours and then a few more hours to upload because it's such a large file. So this is my attempt at a one-take episode, and I just burned about 90 seconds explaining that, but I think it's going to be helpful. So, the what. These are the basics of throwing a party, the basic details and information. Why are we having this? So, for a presidential election, it would be to determine who the president is. But along with that, you get to often determine maybe who a representative is going to be, maybe a referendum on a local vote, maybe probably not the mayor, but maybe the mayor is up for something in your district, or perhaps a governor. So there it could be multifaceted. It could be a number of causes associated with this one party or this one event, but that should be sort of the idea about the what. The next important question when planning a party is the when. Now, the when is not simply just when is the party going to be. You have to tell all the details associated with timing dealing with this party. And as a planner, you have to be aware of that timeline, all the things that you need to be able to get in place for when that party is at the point in time that you determine when that party is going to be, or if you don't have control over when the party is going to be. Let's say you're throwing a Christmas party. You know it's going to be on December 25th. If you're throwing an election party or you're running for office to be president, you know it's going to be every 4th year on the 2nd November of that, the 2nd February of that November. I mean, the second Tuesday of that November, election day. We know when they are for the next million years. We will know when someone is going to be running for president, when that election is going to be held. And so, of course, if you're running for president, you want to time back from that, plan for your primary, plan for your event, plan all your events, plan all your campaigning. So really, no one should be complaining about they didn't have enough time to run for president. They didn't have enough time to get their name out there, because you knew when this election was going to be 100 years ago, a million years ago. It's telegraphed. It never changes. And so that's one thing to think about. If in the event that you're going to invite somebody to a Thanksgiving party, they know when that Thanksgiving party is going to be. It's a universal fact. And they know that there might be other Thanksgiving parties on that day, but they maybe prioritize, go to a couple, maybe just go to yours. If you're hosting Thanksgiving, you probably can't go to somebody else's. But at the end of the day, the important thing to remember is that you provided an opportunity for somebody to come to your party. And if in the event that you're doing something on a different day, let's say it's not necessarily Thanksgiving. Let's say you're doing a birthday party for your 10-year-old child. Now, who are you inviting to this party? Their friends? Are their friends going to remember when this party is? Do they have calendars? Do they have iPhones that they can set a reminder? How are you making sure that people know about this, your child's birthday? Of course, you know your child's birthday. You went through labor. You're going to remember when that person was born. But everybody else isn't necessarily going to remember that. And so that's the difference between something like a presidential election and something like a special election, or even more obscurely, a special election runoff. You are going to have people who simply don't know when that is. They simply won't know when the registration deadline is for that special election runoff. They won't know when the registration deadline is for the election. In every state, the election deadline, the deadline to register to vote could be completely different. And these are all the things that you need to be able to get people prepared for when discussing the when. What time is the election? When do we need you to vote? Is there early voting? Is there on-site same-day registration? If not, we need to plan for that. If someone is complaining about the fact that their voters or their party goers weren't able to show up because they didn't know what the registration deadline was, it's because you didn't inform them. You didn't invite your people to the party in a way that they could be prepared. It would almost be like if I invited you to a party that was black tie and didn't tell you it was black tie. And so when you showed up, you were unprepared. You had on jeans and a t-shirt, and then I have to be the one to tell you, we can't let you in because you're not prepared to attend this party. I'm not necessarily a big advocate of black tie parties. I think they can be expensive, they're cost prohibitive, and therefore it will restrict the number of people who can come to your party, who maybe can afford to come to your party, even though it might be something nice that you want to do. So that's briefly discussing the when, but little things like yesterday with Jon Ossoff's race. Fast forward back to Monday, rewind back to Monday, there were multiple people on Twitter who don't live in Georgia who were telling Georgia voters to go vote on Monday and get it out of the way. The problem was polls weren't open in Georgia on Monday, because in Georgia, what happens with early voting, we have early voting, it starts about a month out from the election day. Typically from then, the Friday before the Tuesday the election is going to happen, polls close at 7 p.m. Polls reopen at 7 a.m. on Tuesday, election day, and stay open until 7 p.m. You know if you're in line by 7 p.m., they legally have to let you vote. That is the timeline. But that's something that I know because I vote in every single Georgia election. I know that my polling location for early voting may very well be different than my polling location on election day. And those are things that people outside of Georgia don't necessarily know. So I'm not going to complain about the outside influence in this race or the money in this race, but that had a lot to do with it. There were conflicting messages, and there were people who simply weren't familiar with the process, who were trying to help, but weren't really being helpful. It's kind of like if I told you, oh yeah, girl, that party's gonna be, we're gonna be here till 2 a.m. and then you get to the party at 1, trying to make your little late entry, and you find out the party closed at 12. Or you just got the wrong day altogether. So you have to be careful, and it's really up to it's the responsibility of the host, the campaign, the party giver, to make sure that their people are informed about those details. So your RSVP for a party is a lot like registering to vote. And if you don't tell people they need to RSVP, you don't have an open party. If you're having a wedding for 100 guests, you invite 200 people and only 100 RSVP, but then 150 show up, those 50 people aren't going to be able to eat because they didn't RSVP. Did you tell them they needed to RSVP? That would be your responsibility if they showed up. So those are things that I want you to get into the mindset of how do you plan a party? Basic stuff. Where? Location, location, location. And this is when we get into voter suppression. Outside of sort of is the polling location accessible to me? Is it close? Can I get there via public transportation? Is it on my way to work? Is there parking at this location? You know, in Atlanta, some polling locations have free parking, some don't. Some are accessible via MARTA. I would imagine some aren't as easily accessible. Some you have to take a bus, or you might have to take an Uber. And so those are things that you want to consider, but it also isn't necessarily up to you where that party is going to be. When it comes to elections, your locations are determined pretty much by where by your district, but also gerrymandering, districting. These are things that are controlled by the Secretary of State and the state legislature. And if your state legislature is GOP, they have the ability to influence how easy it is for people who are more likely to attend your party or come vote for you to be able to do so. And so, I always use the example that my neighbor right across the street has a different polling location than I do. And therefore, when we want to go vote together and carpool, we're not able to do that, even though we literally live 800 feet apart from each other. And so I have to now carpool with one of my other neighbors, or not carpool at all. And so those are things that can become challenging. But the GOP knows this, and this is where voter suppression plays a significant role. Is the access to the polling location familiar? Does it change frequently? And if it didn't change, are you familiar enough because you voted already? One thing that Democrats have working against them when it comes to party attendance or voting is that, kids move around a lot. You go to college, you got a different polling location. You move, your first apartment is going to be different from the apartment that you live in 2 years later. Then you might buy a house. Then you might move or relocate for work. So you're constantly moving around. It's not something like if you're a 60-year-old white person who inherited their grandparents' house and lives in the same, hill where you grew up having Thanksgiving dinner every year for the last 59 years of your life. It's very easy for you to know your polling location is right here. I'm going to go there on my way to work. They know me. Usually it's the same poll worker who is at your polling location, time after time after time. They might evolve or rotate, but generally I see the same faces when I go to vote, especially over the course of one election cycle. So if there's an election and then a special election and a runoff, typically the same poll workers are there, at least some of them are. So those are things that make it more easy for you to attend a party. If I'm going to go to a club for a party, it makes me more comfortable if I know what the surrounding is like. Do I know, is there parking access? Again, do they valet? Is the valet free? Does the bouncer have an attitude at this party? How expensive are the drinks? Do they take credit cards? Do they take cash? Those are questions that you don't have to ask when you fall into the GOP demographic. It's very easy for you to vote for them. It's very easy for you to show up. And you show up because you always go to this party. The GOP doesn't really have to re-illustrate the what. They don't have to re-illustrate the purpose. Their voting base is basically always Thanksgiving. It's the same people. It's just like every Thanksgiving I know I'm going to my Uncle Clifford's house. If I'm not going to my Uncle Clifford's house, I'm going to my mom's house because my mom is hosting, or I'm going to my cousin Angie's house. But it's understood at that point that I'm going to be at this Thanksgiving. If somebody else invites me to Thanksgiving, I might stop by, but I'm going to Uncle Clifford's house. So that's how GOP voters are. I've had friends who have invited me to their Thanksgivings, and I've had to tell them I'm going to my family's Thanksgiving because that's important to my family. I'm generally not going to change that no matter how much I like you. I might invite this friend to come to my family's Thanksgiving, but if you are hosting your own, you're not going to come with me. So expecting to get a GOP Thanksgiving goer to come to your birthday party for your 10-year-old son on Thanksgiving, that's really it's not a really smart way to approach it. If you want a lot of people at your son's 10-year-old Thanksgiving party, 10-year-old son's Thanksgiving party, you might want to invite a bunch of other people who will definitely show up, who have no family in the area. You do a Friendsgiving. You do something different and you appeal to a base of people who don't have somewhere to go already. Now, let's talk about the why. Why is your attendance important? It's important to win an election for a particular party, of course. If you're talking about things like the environment, things like, celebrating, again, the birth of a child, or if you're celebrating a retirement party. If you're doing a retirement party, who do you expect to see at this party? Are you going to see people from your elementary school that you went to? Probably not. Are you going to see coworkers? Probably. So depending on what the purpose is, that's how you cater your invitation. Who you really, reach out to come. So this year, what was on the ballot? There was a lot of progress, and so there was a lot of lack of urgency in terms of getting the Democratic turnout that we wanted. Some would say that the black vote wasn't as enthusiastic about Hillary Clinton because Barack Obama had been president for 8 years. Some would say that, the young woman vote wasn't so enthusiastic about Clinton because those young women felt, we'll have some woman be president in our lifetime, so making sure that a woman is elected now is not a priority to me. Barack Obama's, administration was the most progressive in terms of LGBT rights. So maybe because of the complacency, maybe because you've had so much progress, you're not as motivated to show up. And therefore, you have to look at other things to target. I think, one thing that was very particular was the immigration issue with Trump compared to Hillary Clinton. I think one way that Hillary Clinton tried to reach out to a base that had an urgent why they should be there was reaching out to Mexican American voters by having Tim Kaine be her vice presidential candidate because he was fluent in Spanish. And I think that probably did help her in some areas. Maybe it didn't help her enough. It does depend, and so you have to cater your message to things that are important. This is one area where I feel like Jon Ossoff did not do a very good job in Georgia. If you look at the ads, there was no urgency to the ads, and to some extent, you could really tell that it was an outsider point of view. One ad specifically criticized Karen Handel for driving an Lexus SUV. And it was kind of like an RX 300, one of these cars that used, you could get it for maybe $41,000. I mean, it really wasn't like this. It wasn't like a G-Wagon. She wasn't driving around in a limousine or a Bentley. It was a mid-sized SUV that happened to be a Lexus, And so it's kind of like, if I look at what people in the 6th District drive, they drive Lexuses, they drive BMWs, they have these nice cars. So if I live in the 6th District and I'm choosing someone to vote because I'm not already hardline in a party, am I going to really feel good about you criticizing someone as, opulent taste because they're driving this Lexus? Probably not. It doesn't really make sense. They were talking about $15,000 shares. I mean, $15,000 in shares sounds sort of ludicrous on face value, but if you've ever furnished an office, if you've ever built a TV set or anything, you know that this stuff is expensive. I mean, this chair I found on Craigslist, I might have paid $120. If I bought this chair new, it would have been $450. I have 30 chairs in this studio. I need at least that many chairs. If they were all the same chair, I would have spent $15,000 on chairs. This production is not this lavish thing. Chairs are expensive. And so it really does come down to the messaging was a little bit off. Jon Ossoff did not live in the district. I don't know why. Yes, you have your apartment near Emory. That's great. With your fiance, that's great. But how hard would it have been if you knew you were running for this seat to just sublet a room in the 6th district? Places up there, you could have found a place in the 6th district in Cobb County for probably, $500 a month. You could rent a room from somebody. I mean, I don't know how, legal that is, but I just feel like if the argument is that you're going to move to the 6th district later after you win, Jon Ossoff, I'm kind of looking at you like, well, are you still going to move to the 6th district after your fiance graduates, or are you not? Because if not, then it's kind of like you didn't deliver on a promise regardless. So things like that don't fare well with people, especially traditional people in Georgia. Let's talk about, well, let me double check something. Okay, we're still rolling. I heard a beep. We have the who. The guest list. Again, who are you trying to get to come to this party? Now, if you're having a party that you want to be open to LGBT, trans people, you really shouldn't invite bigots to this party. If you're having a party where you don't want black people there, hey, the Klan can show up. The Klan can bring drinks. They can bring the silk robes or not. I just feel like there's a very clear understanding of who's welcome at these parties, who should show up. And so there isn't a lot of overlap. If somebody was going to invite me to a Klan rally, I would look at them and say, you're fucking crazy. Don't invite me to a Klan rally, please. And if you're going to this Klan rally, I don't want you coming to my party when I have one, because I can't really trust you, that you think I should be comfortable in this area. That's one dilemma that the Democrats and the not-so-Democrats seem to be having now, which is, this chasing of white working class voters with messaging overlaps so profoundly with bigotry and racism and homophobia that it makes, when you invite that into the party, it makes it uncomfortable for the people who are already here enjoying themselves. And no, you don't have to be gay to enjoy a party that's hosted by a gay person or that has gay attendees. But at the end of the day, if you're not open to that, you're not going to be comforting and welcoming in a party environment. And I think a good party has to have some level of trust between the host and also the attendees. You can't just be at a party with a bunch of people you hate. And so there is a need to discuss, who are you welcoming in? Who are you okay with showing up who didn't come invited? And who's persona non grata? Those questions need to be asked. So we've got the who. We could talk about what will you serve? I've had parties where people asked, oh, well, is this organic? Is the wine organic? The wine is free. If you don't want the wine, don't drink the wine. I could pretend to be Jesus and I can wave my hand over this glass of water and you can drink that until you're drunk off your ass. This is what I'm providing for you. If you don't like it, you're welcome to bring your own. But when you criticize what someone's capable of offering you because it's not up to your standard, it means you probably aren't the best fit for that party, one, or it should be incumbent upon you to bring something when you show up. When you come to a dinner party, you should bring a bottle of wine anyway. So why would you complain about your host serving not organic wine if you know that's what you drink? And you have a special requirement, you should bring your special requirement. I used the analogy the other day that Bernie and the progressives are really like the person who comes into your home and throws out all of your food because it's not organic and then tells you that they did you a favor because it wasn't healthy for you. But they didn't give you more food. So as you starve to death, they're telling you that you really owe them a favor for showing you the way. Imagine how you would feel if that happened. And that's how many Democrats feel and why we ultimately just don't really veer in that direction when it comes to the party. The how. Now, the how is all about the campaign. This is where you pull it all together. What are your invites like? What is your fundraising like? What is your budget for this party? You have to balance all this stuff. Now, with invitations, that's like your advertising. I can't advertise a party that's going to serve lobster and shrimp lobster sliders rather, on a private jet, somewhere casual like the Vatican. I can't promise that if you're just going to show up and it's going to be a party bus with a bottle of E&J's and some chicken and a biscuit crackers, like that's just not going to work. Like, so you can't overpromise and then underdeliver to a party. You really have to be aware of what you're capable of doing. And, sometimes people will do that. They will, tell you that the party's going to be a certain thing, or we're going to have lobster, and then they have 2 lobster tails and they invited 100 people. And it's like, then you show up and it's like, oh, well, we ran out of lobster. No, you didn't serve lobster. Like, that wasn't what you had. You really had cheese and crackers, but cheese and crackers can be expensive, but that's for another episode. But, ultimately, that's really where you find yourself. So I think you have to, as someone who's running for office, have to be responsible for those things, for all the dynamics of your event. Dems basically keep throwing lame parties. And it doesn't mean that Dems are ugly or unpopular or disagreeable. It means Dems don't know how to throw parties. And every party is going to be different in every district. Dems are good at throwing one big national... Dems are good for New Year's Eve, right? Once a year, everybody's drunk, everybody's excited, everybody's welcome. New Year's Eve is that time when you turn up and you don't care who you're turning up next to. You really don't care. You'll go to Times Square happily on New Year's Eve and stand next to Muslim people, Chinese people, gay people, straight people, women, men. You don't care. Dems are good at New Year's Eve, but that only comes once a year, and we need to be prepared to throw parties more than just on New Year's Eve, more than just when people want to be drunk and out late and kissing strangers in the middle of Times Square or, wherever you find yourself. So that would be what I would harp on. Speaking of parties, I would like to invite you all to a party. That is the launching of my new web series, The Counter, which will happen here. Of course, I'd like to invite you to a seat at my counter. Not this counter, the counter will be ready soon. And that will be August of 2017 that will be launching. You can follow the Twitter page at The Counter TV, or soon the website will be up, but I already bought the domain. It's going to just a generic, GoDaddy hosting page. Not to give them a plug because I hate GoDaddy, but whatever. www.thecountertv.com. And so make sure you are keeping abreast of that. One thing that I am doing, I want to go over my VIP guest list for this show, which is, of course, my friends to the show, the people who donate to make it possible. And of course, I always accept any donation of $1 or more at www.paypal.me.jkh/jkh2. Repeating, www.paypal.me/jkh2, and you can become a friend of the show by donating. But one thing I want to do is offer a sponsorship level to the new series at The Counter TV, and that is anyone who donates $100 or more will be listed in the end credits of every episode of that series. I plan to do about 10 episodes, so you'll be on the end credits of every episode. 3 people have done that so far, and my goal is to get between 12 and 15 people at that sponsorship level before the launch. Obviously, I have to do promotional images for the show and get the set in order, and then buy food to cook. It's going to be a cooking series that's progressive. It's going to discuss things like throwing parties, etc. So, and there's going to be an overlap between the food and politics and sort of how immigration policy and things impact your budget. So let's talk about our friends to the show. Carol L. of Los Angeles, Jeff D. of Canton, Georgia, and Victoria A. are all sponsors at the producer level to The Counter at The Counter TV. So thank you for supporting my new efforts. I also want to thank Candace A., Karen I. of San Francisco, Dave H. of Harbor Springs, Maryland, Lawrence D. of Los Angeles, Ava J. of Berkeley, California, Heather C. of Irvine, Kentucky, Michelle A., Coraline G. of Nevada, Tanisha B., Shannon H. of Brooklyn, Jason B. of Milwaukee, Shane D., Sydney T., Mia B., Twanta T. of Fontana, California, Stephen P., Juliet B., Elizabeth S. of Sacramento, California, a lot of support from California today, and Clayton T. of New Orleans, who is also an event planner, a fabulous event planner in New Orleans. As always, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. I'd like to ask you to relax, relate, and resist. Thanks.